Jake Turner believed he'd experienced every form of suburban nonsense, until the day someone tried to steal his own truck from his own driveway, all under the orders of the iron-fisted HOA president, Barbara Calloway. Barbara had spent years tormenting the neighborhood. She doled out ridiculous fines, chopped down trees planted on private land, and even tried to outlaw a neighbor's wheelchair ramp, all while claiming she was protecting community standards. But this time, she picked a fight with the wrong person. Jake had evidence, a plan, and a lawyer on standby, all watching as the situation unfolded in real time. And she had no idea what kind of storm was coming her way. Jake had once dreamed of living in a peaceful, friendly neighborhood. When he moved into Oakridge Estates, it had seemed like the picture of tranquility: clean sidewalks, manicured lawns, and neighbors who waved from their porches. It was supposed to be the kind of place where people took pride in their homes and respected one another. But that illusion shattered within a week. He quickly learned that the true power in Oakridge didn't rest with the homeowners. It belonged to the HOA, or more accurately, to Barbara Calloway, the self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac. She wasn't just the president. She was a tyrant in designer heels, ruling the block with rules she seemingly made up on the spot. And Jake, unfortunately, had caught her eye. The first warning came over something trivial: his shutters. He'd painted them a rich, colonial blue, nothing offensive, nothing bright. But apparently, that shade wasn't in Barbara's sacred, approved colors list. A letter arrived soon after. "Your shutters are in violation. Repaint within 10 days or face a $50 per day fine." Jake laughed it off. Who cared about the color of shutters? Then came the infamous trash can incident. Another letter arrived. This time stating that his garbage bins were placed an inch too far from the curb. An inch. Jake measured them himself. They were aligned with every other bin on the street. But no one else got a warning. Just him. It became obvious, this wasn't about rules. It was personal. And now, it had escalated into something criminal. That morning had started like any other. The sky was calm, the birds were singing, and Jake, coffee in hand, stepped onto his porch to soak in a rare moment of peace. That peace evaporated in an instant. A tow truck was backing into his driveway. Not the street, his driveway. At first, Jake was too stunned to react. Maybe the driver had made a mistake. Maybe he had the wrong address. Then he saw her, Barbara Calloway, standing with arms crossed, her trademark smug smile stretched across her face like she was watching a show she'd written herself. Jake's gaze snapped back to the truck. His truck. A brand new Ford F-150. And the driver was already at work. Chains rattling, hooks clamping, tires tightening. It was happening. They were stealing his vehicle. From his private property. Without warning. Jake's heart pounded. He put his coffee down with trembling hands and grabbed his phone. This wasn't a petty dispute anymore. This was theft, and Barbara had crossed the line. He didn't walk, he stormed across the lawn, boots stomping into the damp grass. The air felt heavier, his blood louder in his ears. Every step was a march of fury. He lifted his phone, camera rolling. She wasn't getting away with this. "Hey! Get your hands off my truck!" he barked, his voice filled with rage. The tow truck driver didn't flinch. He didn't even look at Jake. He kept working, methodically, like Jake wasn't even there. The man's greasy coveralls were stained with years of mechanical grime, his eyes dull and indifferent. "HOA ordered tow, pal." The driver muttered, like that made it okay. Jake's jaw clenched. Paperwork? Legal authority? There had been none. No warning. No process. Just Barbara, playing queen of the block. He turned toward her, and there she stood, calm, smug, hands on hips like she was enjoying every second of his fury. "This is private property," Jake snapped, voice tight and low. "You don't have the right." Barbara laughed. Not a nervous chuckle, a mocking, theatrical laugh, like he just told a child's joke. "Oh, but I do, Jake," she said, syrupy and smug. Your truck violates our neighborhood standards. We've received multiple complaints about it. She raised her hands as if the universe itself had validated her nonsense. But Jake wasn't backing down. This wasn't just about parking or paint colors. This was about power, the toxic kind. Barbara had been watching, waiting, setting this up. Jake could almost picture her in her pristine kitchen, coffee in hand, dialing the tow company with that same self-satisfied smile. But she had made a mistake. Because Jake wasn't alone. And this time, the entire neighborhood was about to find out just how far Barbara was willing to go. And how far Jake was willing to push back. What she didn't realize. This wasn't the beginning of another HOA complaint. It was the beginning of her downfall. Unsightly presence, Barbara had said, making exaggerated air quotes with her manicured fingers. Jake's fists clenched so tight his nails bit into his palms. Unsightly presence? He whipped his head around and scanned the street. Just a few houses down sat a rusted-out Chevy with shattered windows. Next door, a beat-up Jeep missing its front bumper was parked half on the driveway, half in the yard like someone had just given up halfway through parking. But those weren't being towed. No, the only vehicle Barbara decided was an eyesore. Was his truck, a spotless, brand-new Ford F-150. Jake's voice came out low and dangerous. This is personal and you know it. He growled, stepping toward her slowly. That truck's fresh off the lot. Meanwhile, your husband's Cadillac looks like it's straight from a scrapyard. Barbara didn't even blink. She responded with a slow, theatrical shrug, like this was all beneath her. Community aesthetics, Jake, she replied in a syrupy, patronizing tone. We all have to follow the rules. Jake's blood boiled. Rules? What rules said he couldn't park on his own property? None. Not a single one. His fist itched to rip the chains off his truck, to block the tow truck, to physically stop it. But he didn't move. Because he knew what Barbara wanted. She wanted him to snap. To yell. To act out. The moment he did, she'd call the cops, and the way things worked around here, they'd side with her. Every time. Jake drew a long breath, slow and deliberate. The fury didn't vanish, he just channeled it. The tow truck driver worked like a machine, oblivious to the tension building around him. The winch tightened, raising the truck's front wheels. Jake felt the ground vanish beneath his feet, his heartbeat thudding hard against his chest. His truck. His property. Being taken. He wasn't just furious. He was burning. Barbara thought she trapped him. But she had underestimated one thing. Jake wasn't the same guy she fined for trash can placement. Not anymore. Jake planted his boots firmly in the driveway. His body stilled, breath steadying. He had faced anger before, when his boss cut his overtime hours, when his old truck got keyed, when the HOA sent him that ridiculous fine over lawn height. But this was different. This wasn't just harassment. It was a calculated, targeted attack. Barbara wanted to watch him break. She wanted to see the tow truck drive off while he stood there, helpless and humiliated. She had waited for this. Planned it. And for one brief, dangerous moment, she had almost won. But Jake wasn't going to explode. He was going to fight, smart. He slowly exhaled, and when he spoke, his voice came out calm, sharp as a knife. Okay, Barbara. You want to play games? Let's play. She paused. For the first time, her smug smirk faltered. Just for a heartbeat. But Jake saw it. That tiny flicker of doubt. And he pressed his advantage. He lifted his phone and turned the screen toward her. Barbara's face tightened the moment she saw it. There, in high definition, was a live security feed of his driveway. The tow truck. The driver stepping onto his property without permission. Every second recorded. Jake's voice dripped with cold satisfaction. I had a feeling you'd try something like this. He zoomed in, making sure she saw every frame. Barbara's breath hitched barely, but enough. Jake didn't miss it. This is trespassing. This is theft, he said, pointing to the screen. And this? He tapped again, a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. That's my lawyer, watching live. That did it? Barbara's expression shifted. Not fully, not yet, but her facade cracked. And the tow truck driver noticed too. The man who had been working in silence suddenly paused, hands still on the winch. For the first time, uncertainty crept into his face. Wait, the driver muttered, throat dry. This isn't a legal tow? Jake didn't have to answer. Barbara's silence said it all. She was no longer smirking. Her jaw tightened, her fingers curled at her sides like claws. Jake stepped forward slowly, eyes locked on hers. And since it's all on camera, he said, his voice a dangerous whisper, you'll be explaining this to a judge. Barbara opened her mouth, but no words came. The tow truck driver hesitated again, now clearly shaken. His posture shifted from casual to cautious, the way a man moves when he realizes he's just stepped into a lawsuit. Jake let the silence stretch, let it grow heavy. Finally, Barbara snapped. You can't record me without permission, she barked, reaching for any excuse. Jake actually laughed. Oh, but I can. Public street. No expectation of privacy, he replied. And just so you know, he tapped his phone again. This footage is already going to the HOA board. Barbara's face twisted in anger. The tow truck driver didn't need to hear another word. With a metallic snap, the chains loosened. Jake's truck dropped gently back onto the pavement, safe. Untouched. The driver took a step back and wiped his hands on his greasy coveralls. Yeah, I'm not losing my job over this, he mumbled, avoiding eye contact. Barbara? She was fuming. Jaw clenched. Eyes blazing. But Jake saw it, the panic beneath the rage. She had lost. But of course, she wouldn't admit it. You don't know who you're messing with, she hissed, venom coating every word. Jake gave a small chuckle, eyes cold, steady. No, Barbara, he said, voice steady and clear. You don't. The next morning, Jake woke to chaos. His phone buzzed with dozens of missed calls, unread texts, group chat pings. Notifications piled up like snow in a blizzard. Bleary-eyed, he rubbed the sleep from his face and reached for the phone. At the top of the list was a message from his neighbor. Dude, check next door. You're not gonna believe this. Jake stared at his phone, eyes narrowing in confusion. What did Tom mean? Check next door. You started a revolution. He opened a neighborhood community group on social media, and there it was. His video. The footage he'd recorded in his driveway. The one showing Barbara's smug face as she tried to illegally tow his truck. The moment the driver trespassed. The smugness. The manipulation. It had gone viral. Not just a handful of shares, hundreds of comments were pouring in. Neighbors weren't just reacting, they were unleashing. Jake scrolled in disbelief as post after post told their own stories of abuse. Lisa M. Barbara fined me $200 for leaving my Christmas lights up one day past the deadline. One day. Scott R. She made my elderly grandmother pay $500 for her front lawn while she was hospitalized. Kimberly T. She told me my daughter's wheelchair ramp was too ugly for the neighborhood. Tried to have it removed. Mike D. She cut down the 50-year-old oak in my backyard. Claimed it was overhanging HOA space. Charged me for the removal. Each comment was a new crack in Barbara's porcelain-perfect facade. Every like, every share, every neighbor who chimed in, it all added up to one thing. Barbara hadn't just harassed Jake. She had terrorized the entire community. And now? The community was fighting back. When the next HOA board meeting rolled around, it wasn't the usual half-empty room with lukewarm coffee and 5 board residents. It was a movement. Jake walked into the clubhouse that evening to find it packed wall to wall. 50, maybe more, neighbors talking, buzzing with energy, their voices charged with anticipation. He scanned the room, and there she was. Barbara, sitting at the head of the boardroom table like usual, But this time her posture wasn't commanding. Her shoulders were tight. Her face pale. She felt it, the shift. Jake found a seat in the back, crossed his arms, and waited. The meeting opened with the usual dull chatter. Finance reports. Block party updates. Mumbled announcements. But it didn't last long. The HOA secretary, Margaret Reynolds, adjusted her glasses, cleared her throat, and calmly said, "Before we continue with tonight's agenda, I believe there's something many homeowners would like to discuss." Barbara visibly stiffened. Margaret looked up from her notes and gazed at the crowd. And just like that, it began. One by one, neighbors stood up. "She fined me for my fence being too high, but 3 houses on my street have the exact same one. My mom had to pay for landscaping violations while recovering from surgery. She threatened to tow my son's car because she didn't like the way it looked. She literally trespassed, cut down my tree, then sent me the bill." Story after story. Fine after fine. Every word stripped more authority from Barbara's face. She sat rigid, clinging to her clipboard like a shield, her knuckles white. Jake could see it now, panic. She had lost control. Barbara tried to interrupt, tried to salvage what was left of her power. "Let's not overreact," she said, her forced smile twitching. "HOA guidelines are here for a reason, to keep our neighborhood beautiful." But her words were drowned in groans and eye rolls. Then Margaret, cool, calm, and firm, removed all doubt. "No, Barbara," she said, adjusting her glasses once more. "This isn't about community standards. It's about the abuse of power." She turned to the board, her voice steady. "And according to our bylaws, any president who has lost the trust of the community," she paused, letting the silence thicken, "can be voted out." Barbara didn't even breathe. "All in favor of removing Barbara Calloway as HOA president?" Margaret asked. A forest of hands shot up. Jake didn't need to count. It was a landslide. Barbara's face went scarlet. Her lips parted, desperate to speak, but no one was listening. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for a single supporter. There were none. Margaret nodded solemnly. "Majority rules. Effective immediately, Barbara Calloway is removed from the HOA board." The room erupted, applause, cheers, even a few whoops of joy. Barbara sat frozen. Then, in one angry motion, she shoved back her chair, grabbed her purse, and stormed out without a word. Jake leaned back, arms crossed, a satisfied grin on his face. Her reign was over. As the room settled down, Margaret stepped back up to the podium. "Well," she said with a smirk, "we'll need a new president." Whispers rippled through the room. Then a voice from the back called out, "Tom Dawson." "I nominate Dan Miller." Heads turned. Dan, a soft-spoken, long-time neighbor who had always kept to himself, blinked in surprise. Then slowly nodded. Margaret smiled. "All in favor?" The hands went up again. Unanimous. It was done. Oakridge Estates had a new president. Jake stood to leave, weaving through his neighbors, offering nods and subtle high-fives. But as he stepped outside, something stopped him. Under the glow of the street lamps, parked neatly in front of the clubhouse, sat a Ford F-150, same model, same gleam. Dan's truck. Jake laughed under his breath, a smile breaking across his face. Barbara was gone. And for the first time in a long time, Oakridge Estates felt like home again.